So we left off, with Yaakov having had the dream. So you remember the dream, we spoke about dreams yesterday, we spoke about interpretation of dreams, we spoke about the higher consciousness or lower consciousness the dreams reveal. So then something very unusual takes place in the text. God appears to Yaakov. He says, I'm going to guard you, I'm going to return you to this place. If you were Yaakov, what would you do next? What I would do if I was Yaakov is nothing. I would be very pleased that God gave me this promise. But what we find is that Yaakov sort of bargains with God. He says, and if you guard me, and if I'm safe, and if I have bread to eat, if I have a garment to wear, if I return to my father's house, I'll give tithings to you, 1/10 of everything I have. What's this if business? So I want to talk to you about trust, bargaining with God, and tithing. Okay? So people intuitively have to trust. Could you see where this is so? So even people say, I don't trust anyone, I don't believe in anyone, everyone trusts. If you go into a taxi and you say, Tachane Merkazit, he could take you to Beirut, but you assume he won't. Okay, you go to the drugstore, you ask for aspirins. It says Bayer aspirins. She could have exchanged the pills for LSD in the back room, but you assume, okay, got this? So most of our trust is instinctive, and it's strengthened through experience or weakened through experience. So a child's instinctive trust, which is something they're wired with, is destroyed pretty early on when a child figures out that their parents really can't do everything. How old are you when you figured that out?
8.
Something like that, 8, 9. Who do you put your trust in then?
What?
They can't do everything? Okay. Okay. Where does the trust get transferred to?
Maybe teacher.
Okay, authority figures. Okay. By the time you're in your late teens, you probably don't trust authority figures that much anymore. Who do people put their trust in then? Friends. Trust me, you'll eventually be disillusioned with your friends. It gives you something to look forward to. Okay, yeah. So people in the end turn towards themselves, which is the worst place to put trust of all. Could you see where this is so? So what do you do with your need to trust? So I'm going to give you a paradigm, and then I'm going to fill it in. Okay, listen to your mind. If your mind tells you there's something to be concerned about, then use your mind to find solutions. But what you're going to discover is oftentimes your mind tells you there's nothing to be concerned about, but you're still, in your heart, very concerned and frightened. Could you see where this is so? Okay, so this is where trust in God comes in. Trust in God is not a substitute for hearing your own thoughts and examining your mind. Trust of God has two bases. One is the assumption that you're a creation, and therefore your life is purposeful, and therefore you're cared about. So in order to achieve that kind of trust, it's good to go back to a time in your life when you felt like good and pure in terms of your relationship to yourself. So this will take you back to early memories. Okay, when people didn't tell you that you aren't good enough, when people didn't tell you that you won't ever be good enough, or whatever. Okay, so the more you become self-aware, using that self as the vehicle of your awareness, the more you would have achieved the first step towards trust. So I want to explain to you what I mean by self-awareness. Picture yourself, did we speak about this in another class? Not yet, right? Picture yourself walking down Rehov Kabbalah. Here you are walking down Rehov Kabbalah. So you see what's on this side of the street, you see what's on that side of the street, what's in front, but you don't see yourself, right? So your whole mind is absorbed by external reality. Now picture yourself in a helicopter. You're zooming over Rehov Kabbalah, and you see yourself. It's a different vision. So in order to achieve trust in Hashem, you begin by seeing yourself as part of the picture. You're in the picture. You were created in the world. You have a purpose here. You're in the picture. So your enemies there is that there are two things that tend to absorb us completely. One is having, and the other is doing. So every so often, once a day, Try to picture who you are without having and without doing, just being. So were you able to get to that place of just sort of being without having and doing? Yes, no? If you can go there, you're going to find it very relaxing. It's a very relaxing spot to be. We're just being, no having, no doing. Okay, you could move from there to seeing around you and realize everything else in the world is also part of the picture. It's also under Hashem's presence. You are, and so is everything else. And therefore, nothing is that frightening. So even though terrible things happen in the world, the fact is, everything is coming from one source, which is Hashem. And nothing is permanently terrible. So I want to explain this to you. Okay, so here are the three basic premises of Ammuna. Everything is from God, including yourself. Therefore, everything ultimately has a compassionate purpose. And if it doesn't feel good, if it's painful, it's there for the sake of rectification and challenge. Okay, this makes sense? So where was Yaakov with this? How could he say to God, if you give me what I need, then I'll give you tithes? How could he say that? So I want to tell you something about what God intervenes in and what he doesn't intervene in. Okay, so you have the three clauses of Ammuna. God's there, therefore everything has a compassionate purpose, and if it doesn't feel that way, it's for the sake of rectification. But where was Yaakov? So there's one thing that God doesn't control. What do you think that is? Your choices. So when he said, if this, then that, he's saying, God, let me see my choices. And I want you to now hear what he said. And God, if you give me bread to eat and a garment to wear, meaning I don't want more than that. Don't put me in a life situation where I'm spending my life in competition with other people. And if you get me back here, don't put obstacles in the way that prevent me from being back, because this is where I've chosen already. Then I'll give you Meiser. So I want to explain to you what Meiser is about. The number 10 is very significant. What's significant about the number 10? Any of you like mathematics? No? Okay. All number systems, even binary ones that use the number 0, relate everything to units of 10. Right? Okay. And where does that come from? 10 fingers, then you have to start with toes. Okay, so 10 is a full unit. So the world was created with 10 statements. It's meant to be a unit that shows God's creativity. So there are 10 times, if you look in the Torah, let there be this, let there be that, you'll get 10 of them. Each one of them reveals a different dimension of who God is. You know more about God when you know that he made light than you would if you didn't know that. But then when you get into the other things, he made animals, people, everything. It gives you more and more information. Okay, yeah? So the number 10 is what symbolizes wholeness. So the idea of giving Meiser is attributing wholeness only to God. I could work, I could earn, I could create, I could draw, I could paint, I could roller skate, I could do a lot of things. But pulling it all together and giving it meaning, that's only God. So therefore, Yaakov says, I'm going to give you 1/10 of everything. So in contemporary life, the way we keep this is through giving 1/10 of our money to charity. So I want to run you through the basic laws of this, and then we'll go back to Yaakov. So the laws I want to tell you involve how much, to whom, and in what manner. So how much? It's 1/10 of your net, not gross, net earnings. Okay, clear? So the way net earnings are figured out in halacha is different than in secular law. Net earnings are the money you have after you deduct the money that you expended in earning the money that you have. So the net comes from income. Money is considered income when either you have a job that you have every intention of continuing to work in this job, you aren't given notice that you'll be fired, or income that you get from some other source that you expect to continue. So this is good for your fantasy life. Your wonderful stocks that you invested in when you were in your early teens now give you monthly dividends that you could live nicely on. That would also be considered income, except for the expense of going to the bank to take it out. Okay, clear? Okay, so that's income. If you have income like Neve girls have, which is right now you're not working, and it could be mommy and daddy aren't sending you an ample check every month. Okay, such things have happened. So you're considered to be a person who doesn't have steady income. So you don't have to give a tenth, but you do have to give some amount of money to charity. Okay, clear? Why do you think a person has to give some amount of money to charity even if they're not working? Even if they're a beggar, they have to give some amount. Hashem rewards you, and also you become a different person if you're a giver. It's bad for anyone to never be a giver. Okay, clear? Okay, next, to whom? So you have here what's called also in secular ethics the rule of access. So I want to explain this to you. Suppose, like this is a fantasy, Neve moves to Netanya, right on the sea, okay? So I'm walking to Neve in the morning from my condo with a view of the ocean, okay? And I notice like somebody is drowning. So I decide, oh, I should save them. Right, that's what you're supposed to do when somebody is drowning, okay? So I go in and save them, which, trust me, if I'm the one who's saving them, we'll probably both drown, but whatever. Okay, so I go in to save them successfully. Okay, do I have an obligation the next day to go walking up and down the ocean front to see if anybody is drowning? No. So that's called the law of access, which means if something comes to you and is within your access, you have a much greater moral obligation than something that's outside of your access. Okay, so if somebody on the in southern India is drowning off the Indian Ocean, I have no access to this and I have no moral obligation there. This makes sense to you? So the closer the access, the more obligation you have in charity. So if you have an actual family member who falls into poverty, your first obligation is to them. Your second obligation would be towards people in your actual physical area. If they're poor people who live in the area in which you live, your first obligation would be to them rather than people who live further away. As a Jew, your next obligation is to Israel, where all Jews are considered to have access. Okay, clear? So that's what access is. Okay, now when you're talking about giving money to institutions as opposed to individuals, hospitals, schools, whatever, yeah? As long as the institutions don't discriminate against the poor, you can give them charity money. If they do, you can't. You can give them your own money, but not money that's earmarked for charity. So an example of an institution that you can contribute to would be Neve, since, as you know, they're very generous. An institute that you can't give any money to would be, let me just think of where they're really nasty, would be Yale, where if they don't have the money coming in from some source, either from their donors or from your parents, they are not going to take you. Okay, clear? Okay, so that basically is telling you to who. Another rule concerning too is don't give all of your money to one individual or one cause, because each time you write a check or give money, you become more of a giver. So it's better to divide it up proportionately. And the proportion will be in accordance to access. Okay, clear? Giving money to causes that don't affect humans directly, like Greenpeace, Save the Whales, what?
Yeah, like PETA.
Yeah, PETA, all of that. You can give your own money to that, but so you could go without something, but the poor don't have to go without anything for the sake of non-humans. This is clear? So you don't give charity money to non-humans. Okay, you give your own money to non-humans. Okay, also within the frame of the law of access, as we said, obviously your money would go to Jews before they would go to non-Jews. Since Jews will give Jews, but non-Jews by and large don't give Jews. Okay, clear? Okay, next, how do you give? So there's a technical side to this, and then there's a personal side to it. The technical side is, as I told you, you have to be responsible and discriminating about charity money because it only goes so far, and there are really many people who need money. So you have to see that the person who you're giving the money to is actually going to give it to someone in need. Okay, clear? So some of the statistics of the larger charities are pretty appalling. So for instance, the March of Dimes, what percentage actually goes to research against, for
30% or something.
not even 30%, 10%.
Gosh.
So this is not a smart charity to give to. You understand this? Now, they make a lot of money, so the fact is that research probably gains by the March of Dimes, because even if all they get is 10%, they're still getting money. But it's not the most intelligent way to give charity. So you should try to find out at least something about the charity you're giving to. So in the observant community, there are people who are called Gabbai Tzedakah. Do you know what that means? People take responsibility for distributing tzedakah. So I'll give you an example. Rabbi Shalkovsky's wife, during her work career, she was a midwife in Shaarei Tzedek for over 50 years. So she saw a lot, people with children who were born with serious defects who require constant medical care, very young mothers who don't have husbands, who are and what are they supposed to do now? She's 16 with her twins, she would see these sorts of things. So she distributes charity, and once she got the reputation as someone who distributes charity, obviously more people applied. And she checks out each thing extremely carefully. So she's trustworthy. So she's just an example of what a Gabbai Tzedakah is.
Is that just G-A-B-I?
G-A-B-B-A-I. Okay? So the best way to give charity is to a Gabbai, just in terms of efficiency. But here are other ways. Okay, so I'm going to take you from the worst way to the best way. Worst way, face to face, you and Tachan Merkazit, resentfully, okay, and very little. Okay, so you give the man a half a shekel and say, why don't you get a job? Okay, here. Why is that better than nothing? Okay, you broke through your resistance to give. Obviously, you didn't want to give, so you broke through your resistance. That's better than not giving at all. And also, he got a half a shekel off this. Okay, clear? But giving, let's say, a 10 agorot piece isn't better than nothing. You know why? Because you can't buy anything at all with it. Giving somebody a coin that has so little value that you could buy absolutely nothing with it, not even a stick of gum, is insulting. You understand this? Like, if somebody has to have 380 10 agorot pieces to buy a chicken, then it's insulting to give them that. So not less than a half shekel. Okay, one up from there. Face to face, very little money, but pleasant. Have a good day. Okay, clear? That's a whole other level. Okay, next. Not face to face. So you give it to someone to give to the person in need, and they don't know who gave it. So an example of this would be there was a family that would invite Neve girls frequently. They liked going there. They were like nice people, cute little kids, but they clearly didn't have enough money. Like the way the food would be divided was always like the kids would get like the wings of the chickens, and the father would get like part of the leg, and the mother the other part, and the guests got all the rest. So they weren't like happy with this situation, even though they liked going there. So before Paysach, they decided, like girls came to you, like they invited us to the Seder. That's a lot of money, like matzah, wine, all of this. So they decided they wanted to give them money because they didn't want to embarrass them by just like handing them money. So I have an imaginative streak. So I made up a foundation. Okay, the foundation is called the Jerusalem Hospitality Foundation. Okay, I made up a board of directors, all of like that theoretically give out money once a year to families that invite students, okay, with whom they had no previous relationship, to their homes. Okay, so with a computer you could do anything, right? A letterhead, a board of directors, it's like not hard at all. So I did the letter. And they made a collection. It's like Neve was a little bit bigger then, but not much bigger. And the girls would go to this family frequently. How much money do you think they pulled together?
200 shekels.
That's what I would have thought. They pulled together 1,000 shekels. I was like so floored. Okay, so then they have to go to the post office to buy a postal check. So there's no way to trace who from whose account this goes. Okay, so then I sent one of my kids to this person's house with the letter, nice stationery, a matching envelope, a fake stamp. The whole works. I sent a kid who doesn't speak English. So the person called, who sent you, whatever, was a, ma? Ma tochotze? Ma? Okay. So it worked. Okay, clear? So, okay, so this is, okay, but the Jerusalem Hospitality Fund so has gone the way of all flesh. Okay, nobody ever used it again. Okay, so in any case, so the best way is if the recipient doesn't know who gave. One up from there is where the giver doesn't know the recipient. Okay, so that means if you were to give money to Mrs. Shalkowski, let's say give it to a family that needs money for medical costs, they'll never know, like you'll never know who it went to. So there's nobody who's embarrassed when they see you. Okay, clear? Okay, yeah? That's right. This is why I'm saying you have to know the Gabbai Tzedakah. You absolutely do. Otherwise, give directly. So giving through like these big public charities is not the most efficient way to give. Okay, next, one up from there, there's even higher, when it's anonymous on both sides. You don't know exactly who gave, and they don't know who gave the money. So that means, like if you don't, let's say one day you come into really big money, right? Really big money, and you want to give like a huge charitable donation. You know how they have like whole wings of a hospital dedicated to someone? It's a much higher level if it doesn't say your name there at all, if it's completely anonymous. When Israel was younger and they were like really desperate for money, once I was in Shari Tzedek, they actually had this. I was lying in bed and there's like a ceiling fan. Each blade had another dedication. It was like, like the Joe Cohen Memorial Blade. I mean, like, whatever. Okay, so like you don't need to do this. Clear? Now there's an exception here. Sometimes if people know that you gave money to a charitable cause, they know it's legitimate. And that will inspire them to give. Okay, clear? So if the cause will suffer if you don't give publicly, then give publicly. There was a very wealthy man who was a big donor to like most of the religious charities here, to Eish HaTorah, to Neve. So I once was at the Eish HaTorah fundraiser dinner. They make one every year. And he was the guest of honor. So after like describing about Meiser, he said how he kept on making more money the more charity he gave. And he had his spreadsheet. It was like unbelievable. He had his spreadsheet from like the late 70s showing that if every year where he gave a tenth, he would make back 100%. It was just like, it was a crazy thing to see. But then after he finished speaking, and there was like music and entertainment, he was working the tables. You should have seen him. He's like, Eastern European originally. He's from, not Eastern European, he was from Holland. But he would go around table. So this year I gave 20,000 to Eish HaTorah. What you're giving, Mr. Reichman? And I was watching this, like today everybody has like, a little adding machine on their phone. He made $500,000 for Eish HaTorah by pressuring people. It was like, I wouldn't say it was the most refined way to go about it, but he was like not letting anybody go. But when he got to me, he even hit me, he said, what would happen, Mrs. Heller, if you give $200 to Eish HaTorah? It's going to change your life, okay? He just like wouldn't see it. So sometimes the person should be rather open. One above that, there's higher even than an anonymous gift. Above that is when the situation fits to give an interest-free loan instead of a charitable gift. Why would an interest-free loan be better than a charitable gift if the situation fits? It's less embarrassing, and what you're telling the person is, I believe in you. I think you're going to be okay. Like, maybe now you have a setback, maybe you had a big medical expense, maybe this, maybe that, but you're going to be okay. You'll be on your feet. You're going to be able to pay back the loan. I believe in you. That's much better than a charitable gift. Okay, clear? But the situation has to fit. If you don't think the person could pay back, give them a gift, not a loan. In other words, you have, let's say, an elderly person who just had a stroke. They're not going to earn the money to pay you back. Just give them what they need. Okay, clear? Okay, the highest level of all is when you make somebody self-supporting. So this could be by teaching them how to apply for a job, how to write, an application, how, like all of the things that you need, how to dress right, okay, paying somebody's tuition in an apprenticeship or whatever. All of this is much higher than charity because it doesn't run out. The person could stay self-supporting indefinitely. In cases where the person is not able to work, so what they do sometimes, in the observant community, is they'll collect a large sum of money so that the person could live in the meantime on the dividends. And then, like if you collect $100,000, you're making $10,000 a year, which for an individual in Israel might be enough. Okay, and then when the person either passes away or recovers, you still have this whole sum with which you could help a different person. So this is called a keren, and it's a very popular way of collecting charity here. Okay, clear? Okay, so now we know how, to whom, and how much. Any questions on charity? So the one who initiated this, as you see, was Yaakov. So then he's on his way. So where was he heading? He was heading towards his mother, Rivka's family. He arrives to the area and he sees three wells with three groups of shepherds by a well, one well, three groups of shepherds. And the well is covered with a huge rock. And he asks them, what's happening? And they say, well, we need to wait until all of the shepherds come together to push aside the rock. It was a very big rock. And he pushed it aside himself. And then he asked some questions. He said, my mother's brother lives in this area. His name is Lavan. Have you heard of him? They say, sure. He said, how's he doing? Great. In fact, here's his daughter. Okay, so let's look at this mini episode. So first of all, there are three people in the Torah who met their wives by wells. Do you know who they were? So one obviously is Yaakov. Do you know the other two? Okay. Moshe. Okay, one more. Yeah. Okay, so the idea is a woman herself is compared to a well. Why do you think a woman would be compared to a well? Yeah, the source of nurture, the source of giving. Water is life. Okay, so therefore, that's why he made three groups of shepherds, which was a hint to him for the future, that he's not going to be the only one to meet his wife by a well. And then, the next thing you see is that Rachel came. Now, what does that tell you about her brother's finances and her father's finances? What does that tell you? They obviously don't have money, otherwise they would have had a hired shepherd. Okay? So do you think how do you think Yaakov saw this? He saw this as good or bad, that clearly there's no money here? So Malbim says he saw this as a great advantage. Okay. He could help them. She won't be spoiled. So this was only good. Now, being a prophet, he immediately recognized her as the woman who he's meant to marry. So he went home with her because he's a relative. And she tells her father, Lavan, look who came. Now, Lavan, as we're going to see, is a thief, a crook, a liar. He greets Yaakov very, very affectionately. Why do you think he did that? Okay, so he knew when his father Yitzchak came and married Rivka, what did he come with? A fortune. So to him, this is like good luck day. So he embraced him, kissed him, but Yaakov was coming with nothing. Okay, why was he coming with nothing? He was running away from his brother who wanted to kill him. So he wasn't coming with 10 camels full of all sorts of good things. In addition to that, he was robbed on the way, so he came with really nothing. So therefore, Lavan, after letting him visit for a while, says, why should you work for someone else if you could work for me? Translate. You are not staying here another day unless you work. Okay. So he began to work for Lavan. What we're going to learn next class is all of the halachic sides of employee-employer relationships. Okay? So stay tuned, and then we're going to talk about the birth of the tribes.